Now you can hear me, Brian, can't you?
I can hear you now, yep. You're looking a wee bit green this morning, Evan, or this afternoon.
Yeah, I ate some Thai food for lunch. Just the way it is. It's probably something with my computer.
Uh-oh.
I used to have a sticker on it,
Yeah.
And then took the sticker off and put on one of those slider things, and I think I have some sticker residue, maybe.
Oh, no.
So I just sent that document over to you, or brought it over to you. Did you read it yet at all?
I did. I did just now.
Hopefully it makes some sense.
It does.
Lots of words.
You're so fast at the words, though. That's the important part.
Don't we get paid per word?
Possibly.
Yeah. So the more words we type, the more we make.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, your security studio looks like the right way. Does this one look the right way?
Mine looks backwards to me, and yours looks right to me.
Huh. All right.
The beauty of webcams. The beauty of webcams.
Right.
We are all good.
Well, we got the right company, so that's good.
That's a good start. I think we'll give people a couple more minutes to get joined in, then we can get rolling here. How's that sound?
That sounds good.
Sounds great, man.
Beautiful.
It's like a fun group out here today. Lots of faces.
Does the camera make me look fat?
Not at all.
Okay.
Camera takes away 10 pounds, I heard. So
yeah, I should walk around everywhere with a camera. Me and my camera. Did you get a chance, Brian? I know we've been swamped today, but to review the chapter at all?
I did.
Thank God for ghostwriters, right?
I took it to lunch and powered through while I was eating Indian food.
Oh, I like it.
I got a little bit of like masala or whatever on it, but
nice.
It'll just smell fragrant now.
That's good.
All right, I think we'll give it one more minute and then we'll start it up. If you guys are ready.
I'm always ready.
I'm ready, man.
I know that. We know that.
It's called winging it.
Wait, that was recorded.
Winging it?
Yeah.
I'm known for that. Brian, you know me.
I do. I am familiar.
Yeah. Me too.
Funny.
I'm not in an airport this time.
No, that's true. Because didn't we lose you for a little bit last time?
Yeah, and I had to join back on, and then we had some kind of recording thing. I had to send it to Brandon. It got crazy.
I spliced it together. We made the best of what we had. So.
But you did a great job of just continuing to talk and carry on the conversation without me, Brian.
Yeah, that's what we do. We wing it.
We wing it.
When the technical problems come, we just got to keep moving.
Just roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's 2:05, so I think we should get started here. So thank you for everybody for joining us this afternoon with our Hangout with Evan. Again, if you don't know Evan, you probably do by now since we've been doing these Hangouts for a while, but he's the founder and CEO of FRSecure. And he's asked Brian McGowan, again, VP of Product and Operations for one of FRSecure's partners, Security Studio, to join in on the conversation, just so that we can make things a little bit more interactive and hopefully more enjoyable for everybody to listen to as well. So we're talking about lipstick on a pig this session, which is basically a cover-up for issues and challenges that we have. Again, as always, we do have the hand raise feature, so if you do want to use that, feel free. I can then unmute you and you can ask any questions that you might have directly to Evan and Brian and kind of add to the, the interactive and conversation piece that we're trying to accomplish here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Evan and Brian.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Evan. How are you?
Good. It's been a long time. You're like 3 rooms down from me.
Shh, don't ruin the mystique.
I know. Online, it looks like we're in different parts of the world or something. All right. So this is chapter 3 of the book, Lipstick on a Pig. What did we talk about last time? Foundation?
Foundation.
Okay.
We did.
So in preparation for today, I printed out this draft copy. The book is due out in October. As I was reading, because I haven't read this chapter since I wrote it back in March. So as I read it in preparation for today, I was like, man, did I really write that stuff? You ever do that where you write something and then go back to it later and be like, what the hell was I saying? But anyway.
I don't think I've ever come across something I wrote in the past and thought like, wow, it was spot on. I'm always like, what was that guy thinking? Mm-hmm. Wish the new me could reach back and talk to the old me about it.
Yeah. So we have a ghostwriter who's writing this again in better English, probably. But Lipstick on a Pig. So this is really a chapter in our book. I think if you've been around this industry long enough, you know places where we've put lipstick on a pig. We either do it ourselves, where I don't know if you've been to a conference before. Let me ask you this. You've been to conferences before, mm-hmm. right? Information security conferences. How often do you go to a conference and sort of just like wonder if these people really know as much as what they say they do?
Yeah, it happens quite a bit, right? And I think I can always sort of divide them into two. Well, there's 3 camps, I guess. There's the people who obviously aren't really relevant on what they're talking about. They either don't know or they're still working through the process. Maybe that's the nice way of saying it, right? But then when you get to those people who are the experts, there's always kind of 2 camps. There's the people that are genuine experts who I think, and you can see the room is full because a lot of people are attracted and they know that they're hoping to get some knowledge. And then there's the people who are self-promoting experts. And I know you and I have talked about this before. There's that, the self-promoting kind of person, right? And you talk about them a little bit in this chapter about, ego and how ego gets into it. And I don't know that people start off intentionally to end up that way, but it just happens. They are more interested in the message of how they get themselves notoriety and how they get noticed and how they can make it on the next speaking tour than they are about giving you really good information. And I think you can see it a lot of times. So that's what I think of right away when I think of going to conferences. You have to, and I've been in a lot of them where you speak with your feet, right? You're in the session for a few minutes and you can see kind of what it's going to be like, and you say, well, I'm out of here. I'm going to go try the next room down the hall, I usually have an A, B, C plan for every conference so that I can jettison from the speech if it's no good or if the room's too full or for whatever the case is.
Well, and so you were at a conference last year where the guy was giving a keynote about something. You were telling me about it. It was about information security, and this person had no real experience with information security. He was just a professional speaker.
Oh yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, it was a kind of a regional trade show, and there was a couple of us in the morning that spoke. I spoke on risk assessment and how important it was to understand your program through the lens of risk. I had a really great person that was right in front of me. I don't know if I told this story before, but the guy right in front of me was a former police chief and spoke on active shooter preparation. Now we're two totally different speaker topics on security, but he was really amazing. He talked about real world scenarios and what you can do and what you should be thinking about, and had the crowd like really jazzed up. It was actually kind of tough to follow that guy. I got up on stage, and I think the first thing I said was something like, wow, it's going to be a tough act to follow after that guy just showed you videos of like what to do if someone's in your office trying to break down your door and how you should protect yourself and what you should do. I said, all I'm here to talk about is protecting your information security risk.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a great track in the morning. It was really like actionable things. Like his speech was great. I think mine was full of actionable items for people. But then they took a break and they had this person who they brought in for lunch, the keynote, and he was kind of the big deal for the day. And it was very self-promoting speech, right? It was basic information. If you've been to any kind of information security conference, it was how to protect yourself against phishing, how you should run your updates on your computer, just your kind of basic 101-y stuff. And yeah, it was really more about how can you hire me to be the next speaker for your information security event? And I wasn't impressed.
Excuse me. So in chapter 1 of the book, it got dark in here. Do we pay the electric bill?
Uh-oh. Hope so.
It's not on my task list of things to do, so hopefully that happened. This light is still working, and that's working. So what was I talking about? Oh, in the book, chapter 1, I talk about information security people and normal people, right? Normal people are people that don't do what we do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And I used the numbers, 785-ish thousand information security people in our industry, in the United States, and something like 327 million people, right? So there's a lot of normal people, because I always refer to everybody else as normal, because it reminds me that I need to speak their language. The language that we like, this document that I just wrote and sent with you today, I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about inherent risk and residual risk and all these things. Those are normal topics for us to discuss, but normal people don't speak like that usually.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're at a conference, I wonder sometimes how the normal people know if the information they're getting is good information or, not. I remember I was at Black Hat last year or the year before. I can't remember which year, but I was at Black Hat, and one of the breakouts was given by, an expert about how to build a security program. Now that just happens to be, security is such a broad topic, right? You can't be an expert in all of it. Like, I'm not a pen tester.
Mm-hmm.
I may have been good at that at one time, but I don't do that anymore. We have pen testers who do pen testing. But one of the things that I've always focused on in my own career is I'm really good, or I try to be really good at building security programs, right? So I was really interested in going to this presentation. I was like, oh, I want to hear how other people are doing it. And I was sitting there with John Harmon, our chief operating officer, listening to this presentation. I sat up front because I really wanted to get I wanted to feel it. And
Yep.
It was bad.
Oh, no.
It really was, because it was like, and John's not an information security. He's our chief operating officer. And even he knew that a lot of the guidance that was being given was wrong. And I couldn't help but wondering how many people sitting in this big room with us are going to go out and build a security program the way this guy was telling you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I struggle with that stuff. And I try really hard, and in the book too, we talk about honesty and humility. And I even have it, on a Post-it note right next to my computer to remind myself not to be a jerk,
Yeah.
to not let pride get in the way. So not to sit there in this presentation and be like, this guy, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. But then also to tell the truth, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the way to build a security program. Do you run into that?
Yeah. Well, what stuck out with you about the presentation? Like, what were some of the things that you could say were not valuable? Were they not good practices, or were they not focused enough for the audience, or what made them bad? And I'm teeing up a softball so we can talk about some lipstick and why some lipstick's good and some isn't good, right?
Yeah. So this one, I'm big, when you build a security program, it's like, and I used it in chapter 2 about, it's how you build a house, right? You have to plan well. You start with the foundational components. What am I trying to protect here? Because that's going to make my program look a little bit different, right? The assets that I'm charged with protecting, the industry that I operate in. I'll use frameworks, but I won't build security programs directly to frameworks. They're reference documents. But this was all about, get this technology, get that technology, and this is, kind of how you start. And it was just, there was no meat to it. So I have a feeling that if people were to, well, and that's one of the things too. I don't know if it's in this chapter, but I think it's in a future chapter, is how our industry has changed so much from being really, you went to the first couple of black hats and it was really about collaboration. It was about learning together, and now it's become so much about selling stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So this presentation was really about buying products,
Mm-hmm.
which, me, it really irritates me when you can't, some of the stuff we're trying to fix, you can't fix with products. You actually have to do work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I was just kind of just squirming kind of in my chair, like, no, don't buy that.
Don't buy. Yeah.
So that's what it was.
I can see. And I think you're right. That happens to a lot of organizations, right? They get lulled into thinking that there's just, there's a set of things, and if they buy the sexiest and the newest and the best thing, it's going to solve all the problems. And I hear you that when you're looking for advice, you have to be very careful that the person who's providing you that advice isn't ultimately just trying to sell you a cover up or a solution, a temporary solution to your problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, for me, another thing, and I guess maybe it's just me. I'm kind of like you. I don't like to be sold. When I'm looking for advice, one of the things that sticks out right away is if somebody's directly tied to a product of some kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know when I pick tracks and look at people at conferences, if it's the guy from HP, I'm probably not going to go, right? And if it's the guy from Cisco, I'm probably not going to go. I tend to like people that represent more industry information as opposed to product information. And I know that all vendors try really hard not to make their presentations into vendor product presentations, but it just sort of happens that way, especially if they have a particular bent they're after.
Mm-hmm.
If I sell an IDS, my presentation is probably going to be, why do you need to have an IDS? Or even if I'm not talking about mine particularly, I'm going to tell you that this is the thing that you really need to solve all your woes. I think the best presentations I come across are people who are in either they're people out in the trenches and they're coming to give their own personal experience. I can think of like when I was at ISC Squared 2 years ago, I sat in on a presentation where one of the CISOs of a major hospital gave a presentation. It was all about how he started. He had been there about 2 years, so it started with the day he got hired and all the way up till right before the presentation, and kind of what had his journey been like. That's more interesting for me because I'm going to learn something about another person's struggle and be able to apply that to my own experience, hopefully. That's way more valuable than somebody who's giving me a product.
That just reminded me. I was at a presentation in New York a couple weeks ago, and it was a penetration tester, and his presentation was all about him, right, and his exploits, and really what you got out of the presentation was just how great he was, not like, should I do something about any of this? But anyway, I mean, that stuff. So getting, to the book, or some of the things that we read in the book, I start off with kind of how, take, the Equifax breach last year, right? And how, more industry, larger picture, I guess, industry stuff. We sell, the lipstick is, identity theft protection. The lipstick is, credit freezes and credit monitoring. And really the fix is stop using social security numbers the way we use them.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I thought this was interesting because I know we've talked about this one a couple times in the past, and how this is only a problem because we've created sort of an inability to solve a real root problem, right? We've taken so the whole thing with Equifax was about leaked social security numbers, right? So we start talking about, well, what could we do to protect social security numbers? Well, what we could really do is not use them in the first place. They weren't ever designed to be an identifier that should be used the way we're using them anyways. But you're right. The fundamental way to fix it isn't to watch for people who have stolen your identity or things that are happening. Those are ways you can try to monitor the problem, but the real fix would be to not allow social security numbers to be used as a true identifier. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a good point when I was reading through the chapter about how there's a Band-Aid or a way to address a problem, but then there's really getting to the root core system, which is we've got a broken identifier. How can we fix it? How can we make sure people can't exploit it in the future?
Right, which is a lot more work, right? I mean, I think one of the reasons why we put lipstick on our pigs is because it's easier. Right? It's easier to go out and just buy something and dress it up than it is to actually fix the foundation, fix the fundamental problem that you're facing. And it always ends up being less effective, right? I mean, we still have plenty of identity theft. We still have plenty of people filing tax returns, in our names. And so until we're going to get serious about it, and then you take that same thing and you apply it to companies. Oh, Brian was a nice guy. Where did he go? Oh, he's back. I was going to get up and get coffee, but I didn't. But the same thing applies to the way companies handle information security. How many Band-Aids or how much lipstick do we see on just asset management? And I always get excuses. Well, it's hard to do asset management, or it's weird when Brian goes away and then comes back.
You know what the technical problem? Headset just died.
Your headset died?
Headset died. The battery went dead.
So then, this is what happens when we go out to coffee too. We just start going out to coffee, and then I can't hear you anymore. I don't know if it's just because I'm talking too much or if I said something mad. And so we take that to a company, kind of the same thing, right? What's some of the lipstick that we see in companies? One of the things is compliance, right? I'll use compliance as lipstick. I'll say, well, since I'm compliant, I must be secure, right? Or you see companies who, in like a vendor risk management program, if you're going to do a vendor risk assessment of me, I'm going to tell you the good things about me, right? I'm not going to tell you the bad things. Unless I know the right way to approach that, then, I accept the lipstick as is, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of the things that we're working with, kind of on the vendor defense side, is asking objective, pointed questions about information security that reveals where the lipstick is, so that I can make good risk-based decisions, right? But it's more work, right? We see other players in our industry just with vendor risk management that are running vulnerability scans or enhanced vulnerability scans, and then propping that up as a vendor risk management tool.
Right. Yeah, or even using inferences, right? We were talking about this the other day. When you look at a way to understand a vendor, you can do the hard work, right? You can go learn what they do to protect your information, your data, or you can take an easy route, which is let's just look at a few external factors that we can view easily and decide if that's enough to tell us what the organization is. And I don't really think so, right? You're sort of relying on a whole bunch of if this, then this, then this, then this, then I can assume they're good. That's a long leap of faith to make, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like objectivity. It's either yes or no. Mm-hmm. That's why I love computers, by the way. That's why I love technology, even though I rant against it sometimes. It's when you're not using it correctly, right? I don't rant against technology if technology is actually addressing what it's intended to address in your organization. But the reason why I love computers and technology is it's discrete. It's on or off. It's yes or no, right? At the end of the day, when you break it down to its very fundamentals, and computers only do what you tell them to do.
Yes.
Which I love that. But people, on the other hand, are analog. They're not discrete. They're not on or off. But if we can take, with vendor risk management, if we can ask you yes or no questions, either you're doing it or you're not, there's no gray area. You get the right pieces put together, you should get a much better result. And that's, at the end of the day, we're trying to get through the lipstick. Tell me what it really is.
Yeah, that's just it too, right? We want to understand what's really happening. You can't make assumptions. based on just what you see from the outside. You've got to really understand what's happening inside the organization.
Mhm.
And the vendor risk one is really interesting, because just because I don't patch some outdated system that's on the outside of the network doesn't mean that I'm not doing a bunch of other things. And consequently, just because I don't have any public-facing devices that have any vulnerabilities doesn't mean that I don't have terrible process inside my organization, that I'm not lacking training and education and awareness and onboarding, offboarding. There's lots of things that I could be doing wrong. So you can't tell. You have it's work, right? We keep coming back to that. Like it's no easy. There's no easy button. It's not an easy thing to do. You have to do the work.
Right. Especially when you think about all the different ways that things can happen, right? We need to account for. Also in the book, kind of after talking through Equifax a little bit, I talk about the target breach.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, the target breach is near and dear to me because of my role in it, not the breach itself, but
I hope not.
But after the breach. And so I was able to, really analyze kind of everything that went on. And now Target had a very healthy information security budget. I mean, $20+ million in 2013 was spent on information security, yet they had this breach. And when they had this breach, then the lipstick came off, and then you could see what was really happening inside the organization. And you realize how much they had used technology as lipstick throughout, right? The $20 million that you spend on information security doesn't mean anything if it's poorly spent, right?
Yeah, well, and I thought it was interesting too that, some of the things that came out of the Target breach were, it's not just raw spending that solves the problem. I think there was interdepartment communication issues. There was a lack of understanding about who was responsible for what. There were people who knew there was a problem and didn't know who to bring that problem to. They didn't have good incident management practices. They weren't really sure if the information they were getting was accurate. There was false positives. There's a lot of things that, just because you spent a bunch of money and got the best of everything that you could think of doesn't necessarily mean that you're completely covered.
Right. And at the time, I mean, the ultimate lipstick is they were PCI compliant.
Sure. Yep.
Right.
Well, they just had a recent assessment done. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything either, right? And you can argue that, because I'm sure when they did their PCI work, they crawled all through their cardholder environment, but did they take a look at the systems that might be in play that were lateral movement locations? And that's because that's ultimately what happened, right? It wasn't something wrong in the way they took credit cards. It was just that they didn't have the right separation in place. They didn't have the right protections. And they didn't, honestly, I mean, you know this more than I do, right? But they didn't have the right way to be alerted to when there was a problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was plenty of lipstick. And, and on the outside, I mean, the Target Information Security Program looked great. The board constantly got good reports on, the things they were doing well. The board had no idea that things, and it's like, for people who don't, I mean, that we can't prevent all bad things from happening. So it's not just like, well, give Target a pass because, it's going to happen to anybody. It was the fundamental brokenness. And that's why Target became so sensational, not just because it's also in our backyard, and not just because the CEO was fired. The CEO was actually fired, I think, more because of the Canada problems than it was the breach itself. Mm-hmm. But it was when you went through and a lot of that information leaked about how this breach actually took place and where it went, it became really apparent that there was a lot of lipstick used. It looked like a great security program, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so the breach just exposed that. It wasn't, well, we got breached anyway.
Yeah, well, and I think you make a good point. And a lot of organizations are very interested in putting the best foot forward all the time, right? Mm-hmm. In your lipstick, you usually want to accentuate the good parts and try to hide the bad parts. And that's what happens in a lot of organizations. I think Target's no example, or no excuse for it, right? Is that they were reviewing their program and they were very confidently placing information out there about what was working. Here's what we've got. Here's the money we spent. Here's the tools we have in place. What they aren't doing is adequately sharing what isn't working also. You suppress those things, right? That's sort of the
At least internally.
side, right? Yeah,
right.
for sure.
I mean, it's one thing to, and like lipstick, just, it's the same analogy. Like when my wife wears lipstick, that's not a bad thing, right? So the fact that Target, made their, and companies today, right? That Target was just an example in the book, and there are others. You can go just about anywhere. Using the lipstick isn't a bad thing. It's when I believe that the lipstick is reality that it becomes a really bad thing, right? Myself, right? So if I'm Target or I'm FRSecure and I tout our security program and all this stuff because I know it helps me get good, more customers, make more money, which is what I'm here for, on and on. That's all good stuff. But then when I start to believe it myself, right? And so I keep telling everybody how great my security program is. Dang, I'm starting to feel like it actually is that good. And then I start, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think Target fell for that. We see other companies, fall for that. Then I transitioned in the book to how we use lipstick personally, right? As information security experts and professionals, to make ourselves look better than we are. And we sort of opened up with that, when we go to conferences. And there's a parallel here too. One of the things that I read, or that, when I was researching for the book in the last chapter, which is we don't have enough talent in our industry. I started to research that and found that 85% of women who go to information security conferences feel like they're discriminated against because we have this kind of chummy kind of bro mentality, which ends up sort of, I think, feeding into itself on our ego. When you go to these conferences, and I mean, everybody's trying to one up each other, right?
Yep.
Oh, you're using, you're using Cylance. I'm using, FireEye or CrowdStrike or something, right? And then you just play this game with each other. When at the end of the day, you get to this point where like both of the people in the conversation end up not really knowing what the hell they're talking about anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think we're all, and I put myself into the problem too, right? We're all hypocrites, I mean, at some level, we all have egos. We don't want to look stupid, amongst our peers, but there's also a sense of like calling ourselves to account. Like, the jargon stuff always torques me. People are throwing around AI.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about AI. What is AI? Because I'm not an AI expert. I'm truly not. But I won't. But I don't throw it around either.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. It's a depressing chapter, man.
Oh no! Don't let it be depressing. I think
there's the good stuff at the end, right? I always opened each chapter with, "These are the bad things. This is why we suck so bad." And then here are the good things. I think things that we can do to be better.
Well, I think it's interesting. You talked a little bit about the hypocrisy too, and that's a really hard place to be, right? Because a lot of us that are in information security have a preconceived or predisposed maybe, feeling like we're supposed to be the expert. So there's this fine line you have to walk where, and I've always said this before, as a security expert, you walk in the room and you're sort of automatically assumed to be the smartest guy in the room. And your job is sort of just not to say the wrong thing and screw that up. Don't let everybody, don't blow that.
Don't let them find out.
Yeah, but you have to do it in an honest way, right? You have to be truthful and transparent, and you have to be able to say, I don't know all the answers, but I do have an expert opinion. And I think that's a really hard line for some people to follow, because it's easy to trip over and take that presumed expert level and just run with it and say, well, obviously I know everything there is to know, and you're interested to listen, so let me tell you what I can pontificate about. And it happens, and I think it happens to all of us sometimes.
It's 4 syllables, pontificate.
Pontificate? I hope I said it right.
I don't even know what it means, but keep going.
But that's the challenge, is we want to be experts. We want to be seen as the person that understands the security risks and challenges, but yet we want to make sure that we can be humbled, be able to admit when we're wrong, be able to admit when we don't know. And it's a tough business sometimes, because your credibility and your Maybe your relationships or your reputation in your job can hinge on what you do and don't know, and so you have to navigate that very carefully. Of, well, I don't want to look stupid, like you said, but I also don't want to pretend to be an expert in something that I'm not, and give bad advice. And I think that's where there's that fine line of, am I doing the best I can do, or am I starting to put lipstick on it at this point?
Mm-hmm. Right. And when you take this as an industry, this isn't just like a me and you problem, right? I mean, we all sort of have this issue, and people make decisions based on kind of the stuff that I spew out of my mouth, right? So if I'm talking BS, how are they going to know? Mm-hmm. They're going to make decisions. So if I'm talking to the board of directors and they ask me some kind of challenging question, I don't want to look stupid in front of them, so I'll make up some stupid answer that seems really credible, and I say it with confidence. So, geez, I must really know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, right?
Well, I thought you did a really great job, though. In the book, you talk about an example of giving a presentation, and that you said, you had some feedback at the end of the presentation that you were, I can't remember what the word you described it was. The wisdom. You had a term for it. Somebody had said, you sure have a good handle on this content. And your answer was, well, I wish I could tell you that I know all the answers, but I'm just a guy who's done the research a little bit, enough to know how to talk about it, and enough to make a slide deck and give you some information. I think that's humbling and important, because that's how you build credibility. That is how I would genuinely understand whether I can trust the source, is if that person is willing to say, yep, I'm giving you the facts as I know them, but I don't know all the answers, and we're all going to learn together if mm-hmm. we can figure this out, as opposed to trying to give information that you don't know if it's true, or you've maybe made some assumptions. Again, it's that like this, then this, then this, then this, that leads me to this conclusion. That's a long mm-hmm. jump. And if you don't tell people you've done that, if you just tell them, I know the answer and here's why, it can be dangerous.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I was I'd given a keynote at some thing, and then I was a part of a panel, and one of the guys that was on the panel with me afterwards said, wow, this is the first time I've shared the stage with a thought leader. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah. So I have the ability to think and lead maybe, but mm-hmm. I don't know what else you're talking about, but it was the same thing. Right. And I tell security students all the time, if you want to be the best security person ever, get really good at Google.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Your mm-hmm. Google flu has to be super strong. And so I think sometimes I'm just better at Googling stuff than other people. Mm-hmm. I've been in this, and I was telling my son, he just graduated from college, Joe, and he's getting into this industry. And so I was telling him how, what was my thought process here? I can't remember what I was thinking. How he's just getting into this industry. I've been in this industry now for 25 years, mm-hmm. and how today still I feel like a novice. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Hopefully that continues to happen, right? I think that's the way you're still learning.
Yeah. Yeah, because we are, right? You see other solutions sometimes out in the marketplace, you're like, wow, damn, that's pretty good. Why didn't I think of that? But I think it's that we need more of that in our industry. We need a lot more humility, a lot less pride, because I think pride is taking us away from a lot of different things. What does it say? Not to do. I don't know what that means. I put Brian behind me.
Watch this.
Oh, dude!
I'm giant right here behind you.
I'm picking your nose, man.
I did sort of look around the side of your head at myself for a little while there, but there we go.
Now I locked myself. Computers, man. But you can still hear me, yeah?
I can still hear you. There you are.
I'm trying to do this.
Now? Oh, there you go. Yep.
All right.
You're good to go.
All right.
So can I build on the humble topic for a little bit more? Do you have examples of people who you see as humble people in information security, people who you have run into over the years and have given you some ideas of how to attack that and present a message in a humble way? You've talked to a lot of people. You've met some kind of key people in security over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the humble people are the people that you run across in our industry that it's obvious what their motivation is. It's not to make a name for themselves. One of the things I'm struggling with, even after doing this so long, is now this marketing team wants me to get my name out there, right? Because now this is like a thing. When your company gets kind of the large enough, you start having to do this stuff.
Mm.
This is super hard for me. I'm happy in my office creating a new solution or working with a client, so this is kind of a new thing. So I think if people kind of, I don't want to use myself as an example, but I want to be humble. I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to be a guy who thinks he knows it all, because I think when I start getting there, then I'm not serving anymore.
Yeah.
I'm hurting people. One of the guys here in our office who I admire, two people, well, actually most of them, but two that come to mind right away when you said that humble thing, Matt Finlay.
Yep.
The guy is unbelievably skilled, and I think just now did his first presentation last week or 2 weeks ago. And man, he's got so much to provide to the world in what he does and how he does things that I've been kind of working him. I'm like, dude, I'm struggling with the same thing myself, right? Trying to make more of a name for myself, but you need to do that. You need to make more people need to know about Matt Finlay, not because of Matt Finlay, but because what Matt Finlay does, which is really cool stuff. Brad Nye is another one that comes to mind, around this office, of just a guy who's got so much to give. Not enough people know about it, but he's a very humble person. He said to me one time after a CISSP class, he said, "You know more about information. No, you've forgotten more about information security than I'll ever know," or something, something like that.
Yep.
And I was like, no, that's not true. But it's that kind of mentality that I don't know it all. So and then famous people that you might know of, Chris Hadnagy is a guy that I've always really enjoyed him. He seems to be really somebody who genuinely cares about people. And on the other side, people I think that are out there to make a name for themselves and are about pride. I hate to say it, but Kevin Mitnick, he's one of those guys where, I mean, you look at his website, right? The world's most famous hacker. Not the world's best hacker,
nope,
but the world's most famous.
Yep.
So, and then he's got right on his website his entire speaking schedule. It's like, man, just because you got busted back in the late 90s or the 90s, early 90s, whenever you got busted and went to jail.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, what was that, a couple of years ago when the guy, and his name completely escapes me now, but the guy who claimed to have hacked the in-flight entertainment system on an airplane, and that he was going to be able to take over and make the airplane divert or crash. That was a guy who seemed like who was really looking for notoriety, right? He had taken something that he wasn't even really sure he had a solution. And it appears after, a lot of debunking that he didn't really have a solution, but he took it and ran with it. He was trying to build a name for himself. I guess that's the thing. If you're an individual out there trying to build a career or trying to build a practice, and he thought he had something that was worth building on, but again, it was kind of a lipstick idea, right? It was just, he had something that sounded good at the surface and was willing to, and was good enough to bring some notoriety to him.
Well, right. And I think a lot of the people that are truly humble, you never hear about them. They're in the trenches, behind the scenes, and they're just doing crazy good work. You run into those people all the time. I'm sure you do too.
Yep.
Yeah, those are the people I really admire. And that's where I like spending most of my time too, but here I am talking to you.
Well, that's okay.
But I do like you.
Oh.
I like you, Brian. Yeah,
well, thanks, man.
That part, but we could go talk in the coffee shop. And somebody could just record what we're talking about. Well, I guess that's kind of what we're doing. So what else is in the book? Hypocrites. Yes, we're all hypocrites. What was one of the things I talked about? Deloitte and Touche. I talked a little bit about their breach and how single-factor authentication on an external host, seriously, from Deloitte & Touche, the number one information security consulting company, or number 3, maybe.
Well, and it goes to show you there that a name doesn't necessarily mean that you're more secure either, right? Just because we're familiar with them, and I hate to say it, but all those big consulting firms probably have had their share. I mean, Arthur Andersen had to change their name to Accenture to shake their bad reputation, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of the way it goes sometimes, is a name is only as good as a name, and you can't stand behind your name. Apologies for anybody out there from Deloitte who's watching, but just because your name is Deloitte doesn't mean that you don't have smelly problems. And
right.
The same things can bite you no matter what. It doesn't really matter who you are, what your reputation is. That's not enough to stand on it. You have to have real actionable stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And be careful. I think originally this chapter was like glass houses or something like that. What do they say about don't throw glass houses?
He who lives in a glass house should be careful about casting stones. Something like that.
See, you're a very wise man. I should have put you in this book.
Just about the quotes, man. I just got the quotes. These are the jokes.
But we all live in glass houses, right?
Yep.
We like to point fingers at other people. Certification and education as lipstick. You ever seen that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's just another one of those things again that, kind of like a business name doesn't necessarily mean anything. Neither does a certification or a reputation for a particular type of education. I think that I've run into a number of people running security programs or working in security programs who came out of theoretical educational programs but had never run one in real life. And I think it's hard. I'm not going to say that you don't deserve a huge a round of applause for the educational experience, but theory and practice are a lot of different things. What seems easy to handle when you're looking at it in a textbook case or in a perfect world case is not how it operates in the real world. And we know as much as anyone else that when you mix in politics and you mix in people and you start to mix in legacy things that are outside of your control, the textbook definitions of information security aren't always the only thing that there is, right? There's a whole gray area outside of it.
Right. I've always thought of 3 things that it takes to make a good security person. It's the intangibles, the things you can't teach people. Either people have a knack for some of these things or they don't. Either they're kind of built for it or they're not, right? Yep. It's like I'm not built for auto mechanics. You wouldn't want me to touch your car, right? I mean, I'm just using that as an example. I actually like working on cars. But let's say that I just don't have that thing, that gift, right? Some people have it or they don't. And then the next one is education, right? Because we all do need to be educated, whether we get that education from news, whether we get that education from books, or we get that education from instructors, or we get it from a 4-year degree, an master's, whatever. And then the last is experience. That's the third kind of ingredient when you're making the cake of a security person. And you can't rush experience, right? I mean, either you've been there before or you haven't, or you've fought through it or you haven't, So, I think I was talking to a guy just yesterday, actually, a good security person, I think. And we were talking about education. He's like, and I asked him, I said, so where did you go to college? And he was like, and you could just sense he deflated. And he felt embarrassed that he's an information security person who didn't have a college degree. I'm like I care, man. You're running a good security program. Let's keep working on this. After the Equifax breach, right? Susan Malden, who was the chief security officer at the time of the breach, she got raked over the coals because she had a music degree, right? Like a music degree disqualifies you to be a security person. I have a degree in geology. To hell. I mean, the volcano thing is pretty cool, right, for a guy like me. But how did I find myself in security? Certifications are good. Education is good, but when we use them as lipstick to hide behind them, we've seen people. There was somebody who used to work here, and I don't have to say their name, but they had a master's degree in information security and came off like they were God's gift to the security industry. No, right? It didn't work. Well,
Mhm.
I don't know. But we'll
No,
run.
I think you're right. The certifications and even the professional certifications. When you talk about some of the places you can go, you can go ISO 27000, or you could go high trust if you're in healthcare. Those are all great things that you should be thinking about, but they're not the solution to your problem either, right? They're not. They don't tell you all the answers. And if you're basing your security strictly on that, you're probably going to find that there's still holes.
Right. All right. So we talked about all our problems. There's still more in the book, but let's get to some solutions. I think I have some in here somewhere. Some ideas. Wiping off your lipstick. I talk about in here kind of an idea, and it's talked about in a couple of places in the book. One is, other professional services industries have a kind of unifying entity or almost a governing entity for that service industry, right? You take legal industry, you've got the bar association, right? You've got the accounting industry, you've got the AICPA. In the information security industry, you've got nothing, right? There's no kind of code of conduct, general standards by which there's a bunch of different ones, but not one set, right? You've got ISC squared, you've got ISACA, there's all kinds of different associations and organizations proposing things, but how do you know if I'm a good security person versus you? Versus, Brandon. I think Brandon's a good security person.
He's a good security person.
We could put him in front of a computer somewhere. He can cause some damage.
Yep.
But I think that's one of the things where I think this industry would be nice to see some unification. Stop fighting amongst ourselves, swallow some pride, and organize together, right? If we're going to fix this thing, we're talking about, and people don't realize this, people don't put this into context, but we're talking about the largest transfer of financial wealth in the world's history, right? Because of breaches, because of dollars that are lost from companies and organizations and people to the bad guys. People don't think about that. We're talking like $6-7 trillion.
And then if you add in all the money that's being spent in the market, what's the newest number? Almost 100 trillion or something like that over the next 5 years. There's an amazing amount of money being spent.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And you're right. And without a singular focus, that's just a lot of wasted money, unfortunately, and time and resources and people and everything.
Right. And people do get rich, but people like to take advantage of other people, I think. Then I talk about in the book, honesty, humility. I think some people take that stuff for granted. I think some people believe it's actually good to have pride, right? And I think pride in what you do, meaning I take it personally. It means a lot to me to do a really good job. That's a kind of pride thing that's good, but it's the other kind of pride thing that's bad. The one that can blind you and actually make you believe that you're better than you are, or better than others, which I think is even more painful. One of the things we had, there was some kind of presentation that we were giving, and we invited a bunch of people on email, and maybe I even put it in the book somewhere. And there was this one email that a lady had sent me, and she was essentially saying, I would really like to attend this, but I won't be able to provide any value, and I just feel like, essentially, she didn't want to come to the presentation because she didn't feel like she was worthy.
Oh, that's too bad.
Right? And so I emailed her back. I'm like, no, you are the person that has to be there, right? I'd rather the other people leave and you be there, because that's a problem. That's a big problem for us. But how many people like to hang out with us? Security people. They're like, they don't get invited to many parties. Do you?
Well, I don't know. I certainly get asked
do.
lots of stuff. I was out last night playing cribbage at a tap room, and I went around the table during the hand talking about what you do, and I said, I work in information security, and I thought the answer would be boring next. But like, everybody had questions, right? Everybody wants to know. There's a ton of people out there with question marks over their heads, and they do want information. And it'd be the most scintillating party conversation, but kept me going for a couple hands of cribbage.
Let me ask you this question, and it's going to be yes, no, not depends. So you just got to lump it together and speak generally. Do CISOs suck at relationships?
Yes, typically. They
You
don't
didn't even
build.
hesitate.
No, they don't. Well, they're never good at build. And I guess my initial thought right away and why I answered so quick is because they don't ever seem to build relationships in their own organizations. It seems like the general mentality of the CISO is to build defenses right away. And that's always a failure. I talk to organizations all the time and I say, in a perfect world, I would design your security team so that they work together in tandem with your operations team. They're separate but equal, and they work together. In most organizations, the security team, and usually kind of their own behest, has created this fortress they put themselves in, and they do sort of look down from their gates at other people, and then they can't ever get buy-in, and then they wonder why it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because everybody thinks you're jerks. So
I know. And
sorry,
I'm not,
that was I
no,
definitely had
I
a
hear
feeling
you.
right off the bat.
I'm not very politically correct, and so I wouldn't have used the word jerks. I would have used something different and then gotten in trouble, and you'd have to cut it out of the recording and all that. But yeah, and I read an article recently, and I'm actually going to write an article myself on why CISOs suck at relationships, right? And I always like to put myself into the problem too, because I'm not immune to this. Neither are you.
Nope.
But hubris was a big point in this article that this other person had written. I think that was even published on Forbes or something. I mean, it was a big deal. And this makes it so, like, and this is a good segue to kind of something that's coming up too, is next, did they say Wednesday? Next Wednesday, we have our Hacks and Hops, where we've got some very influential CISOs on that panel. And I think I suck at relationships too. So, but I'm super excited to meet these guys and gals. There's a couple of ladies on that panel too, just to build relationships. Because I know that I'm not strong at relationships either. And I'm guessing that if they're like the rest of us, they're probably not awesome at it. But I'm looking forward to that. And so that's Hacks and Hops. It's next Wednesday at
Surly.
Yeah, Surly Brewery. I don't drink, so I've never actually been there before. Lastly, I closed the book and I gave some examples of some humble service, right? People that have contributed to our industry that I would like to emulate myself after, and I think we should all strive to be more like. And people like Horst Feistel, Lance Hoffman, Butler. These are people that you haven't heard of before. So going back to people that I admire, in our industry, this is a list, and there's actually a Cybersecurity Hall of Fame, and you can look it up, you can Google it, because there's some people that made huge impacts to our industry. Ralph Merkel, Susan Landau, Paul Cocker. I mean, there's a ton of them. We need more of those people, right, in our industry, people that are actually in this and I'm sure, for people that like to get rich and all that stuff, I'm sure those people got paid well. They got good jobs or had good jobs. And then lastly, simplification. That's one of the big pieces.
I hoped you wouldn't run out of time to talk about simplification, because I saw it at the end, and it's definitely the best way, right? I mean, you should go for it. Take the minute. Do it.
No, you do it.
Oh, well, I would just say, one of the things that always sticks in my mind when we think about lipstick is it's a way of covering up, and complication always covers up. I think when you're looking to make things better, you got to strip it down. You got to simplify. You got to really understand what your core things are, and then build them up again. And so I love that you closed with simplify, because I think it's the biggest problem, or the biggest opportunity when you're looking at how do we get the lipstick off the pig. We have to simplify, right? The technology stuff, we can tend to be super overcomplicated. We can tend to super over-engineer a problem. We can have too many layers. So I think the simplest way to get back to basics and to really solve your problem is to simplify. You also talked in the book about really understanding what your core problem is, and understanding what the core, what your pig is. First off, you got lipstick on your pig, but what's your pig, and why is it a pig? And can you make it a better pig instead of just dressing it up with some lipstick? That's all part of simplify to me. It's boil it down to the base, figure out what you're really trying to do, and then work on what's actually going to make things better, rather than just trying to put a nice fresh coat of paint over the outside.
Yeah. very true. One, the first time I ever heard complexity is the enemy of information security was Bruce Schneier. In 2002, maybe, he was interviewed for Computer World magazine, and I'd read that, and I was like, dang, that makes a lot of sense. You know what I mean? Like, and it's logical. And Bruce Schneier is another one of those guys where I don't think he's really in it to make a name for himself. He's just really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be another one that I would list. But yeah, simplify. 3-step process, 2-step process, a lot easier to secure than a 37-step process.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got so many examples where people have implemented these complicated, convoluted, security processes, access control processes, or change control processes, and then complain that it doesn't work, or it's. And a lot of times too, we'll see where we use technology as lipstick and overcomplicate things as you keep piling technologies on top of technologies,
mm-hmm.
right? Thinking that that's going to give you the coverage that you need, not even knowing what it is you're trying to cover.
Yep.
Right. So
Or you
simplify
forget
everything.
Get so much. You get so many layers that you forget what you were first trying to do. You've got layers that are fighting the layers, and layers trying to solve problems that were introduced because of other complexities. I think that's also a thing that happens a lot of times in security programs.
Yep. I agree. All right, it's 3:01. Brandon, are we done?
That it is. We're done if you guys are done. So I haven't seen too many comments straggling in anymore. So I think we can safely wrap this up. So thank you everybody for joining Evan, Brian, myself, and the rest of the FRSecure and Security Studio team with today's Hangout. We will absolutely be sending out the recording if you'd like to, watch this back and maybe gain something that you might have missed along the way. And look out for next month's Hangout too, as Evan will take on the next chapter in his book. And I don't know, are you going to bring in a guest next time?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sounds good. There will be
special
some
guest.
Too, so.
Brian is special, but this one's going to be special.
All right. So absolutely be on the lookout for that too, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
All right.
Thanks everybody.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.